I was 3 coffees deep into what felt like the longest Monday morning of my life when Sarah walked into our department's bullpen. Even from across the room, I could see that focused look she got when something big was brewing. At 26, I'd been working at Meridian Marketing for 8 months, and I'd learned to read the subtle signs that preceded major announcements. "Team meeting in 5, she called out, her voice carrying that authoritative tone that somehow never felt harsh. Sarah Chen had been our senior marketing director for 3 years. In that time, she'd built a reputation for being brilliant, demanding, and utterly professional. At 34, she commanded respect in a way that seemed effortless, though. I suspected it had taken years of careful cultivation. I gathered my notebook and followed Mike Rodriguez, my friend from college who'd gotten me this job, into the conference room. Mike had this easy way about him, always ready with a joke, always assuming the best about people. We'd been roommates senior year, and even now, he remained one of those genuinely good people who made everyone around him feel comfortable. "All right, everyone," Sarah began, pulling up a presentation on the smartboard. She was wearing a navy blazer that complemented her dark hair, which was pulled back in her signature low bun. I'd noticed these details about her appearance over the months, not in any inappropriate way, I told myself, but because she carried herself with such deliberate elegance that it was hard not to notice. "We've just secured the Pinnacle Industries account," she continued, and the room erupted in quiet celebration. Pinnacle was one of those clients everyone in marketing dreamed about: huge budget, innovative products, and a reputation for loyalty to agencies that delivered results. "The catch," Sarah said, raising a hand to quiet our excitement, "is that they want to see our capabilities firsthand. There's a major industry conference in Chicago next week. They've requested that we present our preliminary campaign concepts. It's not just a presentation, it's a 3-day intensive where we'll be working alongside their team, refining our approach in real time." My heart started racing. This was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been hoping for since starting at Meridian. The chance to work on a major account, to prove myself beyond the routine social media campaigns and market research reports that had been my bread and butter. "I'll be leading the team," Sarah continued, "and I'm taking 2 people with me." Eyes scanned the room, and I found myself sitting straighter, hoping my expression conveyed competence and eagerness without seeming desperate. "Mike, I need your analytics expertise for the ROI projections they're expecting." Mike grinned and gave me a subtle thumbs up under the table. "And Alex," she said, turning to me, "your fresh perspective on digital engagement has impressed me. I think you'll bring something valuable to the table." I managed to keep my voice steady when I thanked her, but internally, I was celebrating. This wasn't just a career opportunity, it was validation. Sarah wasn't someone who gave praise lightly, and to be selected for something this important felt like a turning point. "We leave Monday morning," she said, distributing folders with preliminary information. "I expect everyone to be thoroughly prepared. This isn't just about our agency. It's about setting the standard for what innovative marketing looks like." The meeting dispersed. I caught a glimpse of Sarah gathering her materials with the same methodical precision she brought to everything. There was something fascinating about watching her work, the way she organized her thoughts, the careful consideration she gave to every detail. I'd always admired her professionalism, but there were moments, brief ones, where I caught glimpses of something more underneath that polished exterior. "Dude, this is huge," Mike said, appearing at my elbow as we walked back to our desks. "Chicago's going to be incredible. Sarah doesn't mess around with these big accounts if she picked you. It's because she sees real potential." I nodded, still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. But as I settled back at my desk and opened the folder Sarah had given me, I found myself thinking less about the professional opportunity and more about the prospect of spending 3 days working closely with someone I'd only ever interacted with in brief, professional exchanges. Monday morning at O'Hare felt like controlled chaos. Our 8 a.m. flight had been delayed until 10:30, then pushed back again to 12:15. What should have been a quick morning flight had turned into an entire day spent in the departure lounge, watching Sarah pace near the gate while periodically checking her phone and typing rapid-fire emails. "This is exactly why I always book the first flight out," she muttered, more to herself than to us. But there was something different about her frustration, less controlled than her usual office demeanor. More human. Mike had claimed a bank of seats, and and was already deep into a mobile game. Earbuds in, occasionally chuckling at whatever was happening on his screen. That left Sarah and me in an unexpected bubble of proximity. The formal structure of our office hierarchy somehow softened by the shared inconvenience of travel delays. "I'm sorry about this," she said, settling into the seat across from me. "No, you probably had other things planned for today." "Actually, this is perfect," I replied, gesturing to the folders spread across my lap. "Gives me more time to go through the Pinnacle materials. Some of their market positioning strategies are really innovative." Something shifted in her expression, surprise, maybe, or approval. Most people would be complaining about the delay. "Most people probably have more exciting lives to get back to," I said, then immediately worried that sounded pathetic. Sarah smiled, the first genuine one I'd seen from her outside of client meetings. "You know, when I was your age, I thought having an exciting life meant never being satisfied with where you were," she said, always looking for the next opportunity. The next promotion, the next thing that would make me feel like I'd arrived. There was something wistful in her voice that caught me off guard. "And now?" She was quiet for a moment, watching the maintenance crew working on our aircraft through the terminal windows.
Ow.
"Now I think maybe excitement is overrated. Stability. Meaningful work, genuine connections, those things matter more than I used to think." It was the most personal thing she'd ever said to me, and I found myself studying her profile as she watched the planes taxiing outside, away from the office. She seemed smaller somehow, less imposing, still elegant, still poised, but more ... accessible. "Is that why you went into marketing?" I asked. "For the stability," she laughed, a sound I'd rarely heard in our professional interactions. "God, no. I went into marketing because I was idealistic and thought I could change how brands connect with people, make advertising more authentic, more meaningful." She turned back to me, and there was something almost vulnerable in her expression. "What about you? Why marketing?" I'd given this answer in job interviews, but sitting here with her, the standard responses felt inadequate. Honestly, I like figuring out what makes people tick, what motivates them, what they care about, what they're afraid of. Marketing is just applied psychology, isn't it? "That's a surprisingly mature perspective," she said, and I felt a flush of pride at her approval. Mike's snoring from across the seating area broke the moment, and we both looked over at him, slumped against his carry-on bag with his mouth slightly open. "He's been like that since college," I said. "Give him 5 minutes of stillness, and he's out." "You two seem close," Sarah observed. "He's one of those friends who just makes everything easier," I said. "Never any drama, never any competition. Just genuinely wants everyone around him to be happy." "That's rare," she said quietly, and something in her tone made me wonder about her own friendships, her own support system. Our conversation was interrupted by the boarding announcement. Finally, after nearly 5 hours of delays, as we gathered our belongings, Sarah's phone buzzed with what seemed like the 100th call of the day. "Sarah Chen," she answered, immediately snapping back into her professional voice as she discussed client expectations and timeline adjustments. But as we walked toward the gate, I caught her glancing back at me, as if we'd started a conversation. She wasn't quite ready to finish. The flight itself was uneventful, but I found myself hyper-aware of Sarah's presence in the seat across the aisle. She worked steadily on her laptop, occasionally making notes in the margins of printed documents, completely absorbed in her preparation. Mike slept again, and I alternated between reviewing my own materials and stealing glances at Sarah's focused concentration. There was something compelling about watching someone who was truly excellent at their job. The way she organized information, the thoughtful pauses before making notes, the occasional slight frown when she encountered something, that required deeper consideration. I'd always admired competence. But there was something particularly attractive about Sarah's brand of intelligent strategic. Thorough, but with flashes of creativity that suggested there was more to her than just professional excellence. When the pilot announced our descent into Chicago, Sarah closed her laptop and looked out the window at the city sprawling below us. For just a moment, her composed mask slipped, and I saw something that looked like apprehension cross her features. "Everything okay?" I asked, She turned to me, seeming almost surprised by the question. Just thinking about how much is riding on this presentation, Pinnacle could change everything for our agency. No pressure or anything, I said, trying for lightness. She smiled at that, and I realized I was becoming addicted to those moments when her professional composure gave way to something more genuine. You know what? I have a good feeling about this team. We're going to do something special. The Marriott downtown was exactly the kind of upscale business hotel I'd expected for a client like Pinnacle Marble Lobby. Efficient staff, the subtle hum of important people conducting important business. Sarah approached the reception desk with her usual confidence, while Mike and I hung back with the luggage. Reservation for Chen, Sarah. 3 rooms for 3 nights. The desk clerk's expression shifted from professional courtesy to apologetic concern as he typed on his computer. I'm terribly sorry, Miss Chen, but there seems to have been an issue with your reservation. I saw Sarah's shoulders tense slightly. What kind of issue? It appears that due to the industry convention this week, we're experiencing unprecedented demand. Your company's travel agent made the reservation, but there was a booking error in our system. We only have 1 room available. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Mike stepped forward, ever the problem solver. What about other hotels in the area? I've already checked, sir. The entire downtown core is fully booked due to the convention. I could try to find accommodations in the suburbs, but that would put you quite far from the convention center. I watched Sarah's face as she processed this information. Her jaw tightened slightly, the only outward sign of her frustration, but her voice remained level. What type of room is available? A double queen suite on the 15th floor. One of our larger rooms with a sitting area and ... We'll take it, Sarah said decisively, then turned to Mike and me. I'm sorry about this. This is completely unprofessional. Mike was already pulling out his phone. Actually, this might work out. My buddy Jake lives in Lincoln Park. I could probably crash at his place. You two could have the room. The suggestion hung in the air, and I could see Sarah weighing the propriety of the situation. Sharing a hotel room with a subordinate, even with separate beds, crossed professional boundaries she'd probably never had to consider. I don't want to put anyone in an uncomfortable position, she said carefully. This was my moment to either make things more complicated or to offer a solution. I thought about the months of professional interactions we'd had, about Sarah's consistent fairness and respect in all our dealings, about the glimpse of vulnerability I'd seen during our delayed travel day. I don't mind sharing, I said, trying to keep my voice casual and practical. We're all adults. We're here for work, and honestly, after 18 months of living alone in a studio apartment, a hotel suite sounds pretty luxurious. Mike nodded, enthusiastically. See? Problem solved. Plus, Jake's been wanting to show me around Chicago anyway. This actually works out perfectly for everyone. Sarah looked between us, clearly still uncertain. Are you sure? I can probably find somewhere else to stay, ... Sarah, I said, using her first name deliberately. It's fine. We're professionals. It's a work trip, and it's just sleeping arrangements. Besides, I added with what I hoped was a reassuring smile, I promise I don't snore like Mike does. Hey, Mike protested, but he was grinning. For a moment, Sarah's composed mask slipped again, and I saw something that might have been gratitude, or relief, or maybe just exhaustion from a long day of travel complications. All right, she said. Finally, but I'm paying for room service dinner as an apology for this awkward situation. As we waited for Mike's friend to pick him up and for the bellhop to take our bags upstairs, I found myself wondering what I'd just agreed to. Sharing professional space with Sarah was one thing, sharing personal space, even temporarily, felt like crossing into uncharted territory. The suite was impressive by any standard to queen beds, separated by a nightstand and reading chair, a sitting area with a couch and work desk near the windows, and a bathroom that was larger than my apartment's bedroom. But standing there with Sarah, both of us holding our respective luggage, the spaciousness somehow felt insufficient. This is nice, I said, setting my bag on the bed closest to the window. I'll take this one, Sarah said, indicating the bed. Nearer to the bathroom. I'm usually up earlier and I don't want to wake you. The practicality of the arrangement couldn't mask the underlying strangeness of the situation. Here was my boss, someone I'd only ever seen in professional contexts, hanging her blazer in the same closet where I'd just put my conference clothes. "The client dinner isn't until 7, Sarah said, checking her phone. "It gives us a couple hours to review our materials and coordinate our approach." We spread our documents across the sitting area, and for a while, it felt almost normal. Sarah's dedication to preparation was something I'd observed from a distance in the office, but seeing it up close was remarkable. She had color-coded folders, detailed timelines, and backup plans for scenarios I would never have considered. "You're incredibly thorough," I observed, as she cross-referenced client preferences with our preliminary campaign concepts. "I have to be," she said, without looking up. "When you're a woman in marketing, especially one who looks younger than she is, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. Every presentation has to be flawless, every detail anticipated." It was another glimpse behind her professional facade, and I found myself curious about the experiences that had shaped her approach to work, to leadership, to the careful control she maintained over her environment. The client dinner was at an upscale steakhouse downtown, and Sarah transformed back into her polished professional self the moment we left the hotel room. She'd changed into a black dress that was elegant without being flashy, paired with a blazer that signaled competence and authority. Walking beside her to the restaurant, I was struck by how effortlessly she commanded attention, not through any overt behavior, but simply through her presence. The dinner itself was a success. Our clients from Pinnacle were impressed with our preliminary research, excited about our creative concepts, and confident in our ability to deliver results. Sarah navigated the conversation with skill, drawing Mike and me into the discussion in ways that showcased our expertise while maintaining her position as team leader, but it was the small moments I found myself noticing the way she smiled. When describing our agency's philosophy, the careful attention she paid to each client's concerns, the subtle signals she gave Mike and me to indicate when we should speak up or step back. She was conducting a professional orchestra, and somehow I'd been given a significant part to play. By the time we returned to the hotel, it was nearly 10 p.m. The success of the dinner had energized all of us. But now, back in our shared space, the energy shifted into something more intimate. "That went really well," Sarah said, kicking off her heels and settling onto the couch. "You both did exactly what I hoped you would." "It felt good," I agreed, loosening my tie and taking the chair across from her. Like we were actually contributing something valuable. Sarah was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the Chicago skyline. "Can I tell you something?" she said finally. I nodded, curious about this shift in her tone. "I was nervous about bringing both of you on this trip. Not because I doubted your abilities, but because—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Because I've gotten used to handling major clients alone. Trusting other people with something this important feels scary." The admission surprised me. Sarah had always seemed supremely confident, completely self-assured in her professional judgment. "Made you decide to take the risk?" I asked. She looked at me then, directly, and I felt something shift in the air between us. "Honestly, because I realized I was getting tired of doing everything alone, and because I thought maybe it was time to see what happened when I let other people into the process." There was something in her voice, in the way she was looking at me, that felt like it extended beyond professional collaboration. But before I could process that thought fully, she stood up, smoothing her dress. "We should probably get some sleep," she said, her professional demeanor returning. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day," as we prepared for bed, Sarah disappearing into the bathroom first. Then me brushing my teeth while she organized her materials for the morning. I found myself hyper-aware of every sound, every movement. This wasn't just sharing space with a colleague. This was sharing intimate, domestic space with someone I was beginning to realize I found far more compelling than I'd previously admitted to myself, lying in my bed in the dark. Subtle sounds of Sarah settling into sleep across the room. I stared at the ceiling and wondered what exactly I'd gotten myself into. The presentation went flawlessly. Standing in that gleaming conference room, watching Sarah command the attention of 12 Pinnacle executives while seamlessly weaving in the insights Mike and I had contributed, I felt something I'd never experienced in a professional setting. Before genuine pride mixed with an almost electric excitement, the digital engagement metrics Alex identified show a 340% increase in meaningful brand interactions when we target this specific demographic, Sarah was saying, turning to acknowledge me with a smile that felt different from her usual professional courtesy. Warmer, more genuine. I delivered my portion of the presentation with more confidence than I'd expected, feeding off the energy Sarah had created in the room. When I finished outlining our social media strategy, she nodded at me with what could only be described as genuine admiration. "Excellent work," she said quietly, as the clients discussed our proposal among themselves. That was exactly what they needed to hear. The praise hit differently than the usual feedback I received. This wasn't just my boss acknowledging competent work. This was someone I respected recognizing something valuable in what I'd contributed. Mike crushed his analytics presentation. As expected, and by the time we wrapped up, the Pinnacle team was already talking about implementation timelines and budget allocations. We'd not only secured the account, but exceeded their expectations. "Drinks," declared Patricia Morrison, Pinnacle's CEO, as we gathered our materials. "This calls for a proper celebration." The bar at the Palmer House was the kind of old Chicago. The establishment that probably looked exactly the same as it had 50 years ago. Dark wood, leather banquettes, and the quiet hum of serious people conducting serious business over expensive liquor. But tonight, Corna felt different. Celebratory. I watched Sarah over the rim of my whiskey glass as she laughed at something Patricia was saying. Away from the formal structure of the presentation, she seemed to unfold somehow. Her posture relaxed, her smile came easier, and when she gestured while telling a story about a previous client disaster, I caught glimpses of someone far more animated than the controlled professional I thought I knew. "Sarah's brilliant," Mike said quietly, following my gaze. "I mean, we always knew she was good at her job, but watching her work a room like that, it's pretty impressive." I nodded, unable to articulate that what I was finding impressive went beyond her professional skills. There was something magnetic about Sarah when she allowed herself to be fully present, fully engaged. The way she listened when Patricia talked about her company's challenges, the thoughtful questions she asked, the genuine interest she showed in people's responses, it wasn't just good client management. It was authentic engagement. By 10 p.m., the Pinnacle team began making their excuses. Patricia shook each of our hands, reiterating how pleased they were with our proposal. Mike checked his phone and announced that Jake was having people over. If anyone wanted to continue the celebration. "I think I'm good," Sarah said, settling back into the bank. "But you should go, Mike. Don't let us old folks hold you back." "Old folks?" I protested. "Sarah, you're like 8 years older than me." "Ancient," she said with a mock-serious expression that made me laugh. Mike looked between us with that slightly puzzled expression he got when social dynamics were happening that he couldn't quite parse. "You sure you don't want to come?" "Got this great rooftop setup. Go," Sarah said firmly. "Enjoy being 27. Alex and I can handle debriefing without you." After Mike left, the energy in our corner shifted, more intimate somehow, without the buffer of other conversations happening around us. Sarah ordered another glass of wine, and I found myself studying the way the dim bar lighting played across her features when she smiled. "So," she said, turning to face me more directly, "how does it feel to nail your first major client presentation?" "Honestly, terrifying and exhilarating at the same time," I said. "Like I finally understand why you love this work so much." Something flickered across her expression. "What makes you think I love this work?" The question surprised me. "You're incredible at it. And you seem so invested, passionate even." She was quiet for a long moment, swirling the wine in her glass. "I am passionate about it," she said finally. "But sometimes I wonder if that's healthy or just convenient." "What do you mean?" "When you pour everything into your career, it's easy to avoid dealing with the rest of your life," she said. "Work has clear metrics, achievable goals, measurable success. Personal relationships are messier." It was the most honest thing she'd said to me, and I found myself leaning forward, drawn into this unexpected vulnerability. Is that why you got divorced? The question slipped out before I could stop myself, and I immediately regretted the intimacy it implied. But Sarah didn't seem offended. Partly, she said. David used to say I was married to my job. He wasn't entirely wrong. She paused, taking a sip of wine. What about you? Is anyone special putting up with your newfound workaholic tendencies? I laughed, but there was something hollow in the sound. No one putting up with anything. I'm still figuring out how to be a functioning adult, let alone how to maintain a relationship while doing it. Seemed like you're figuring it out pretty well to me. Really? I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Really, you're thoughtful, you're ambitious, without being ruthless, and you actually listen when people talk. Those are rarer qualities than you might think. The compliment felt significant coming from her, and I found myself studying her face. In the dim lighting, noticing details I'd never allowed myself to observe before, the subtle laugh lines around her eyes. The way her lipstick had worn off over the course of the evening, the genuine warmth in her expression when she wasn't. Maintaining professional distance. We should probably head back, she said eventually, but she made no move to leave. Probably, I agreed, also staying put. The elevator ride to our floor was quiet, both of us slightly wine-relaxed, but far from drunk. The successful day had created a bubble of comfortable intimacy that neither of us seemed eager to break. By returning to the practical realities of shared sleeping arrangements. Nightcap? Sarah asked as we entered our room. I think there's a bottle of champagne in the minibar that Pinnacle probably wouldn't mind us opening. We settled onto the couch with glasses of champagne that were probably overpriced but tasted like celebration. The Chicago skyline glittered outside our window. The room felt cozy in the lamplighter. Private sanctuary away from the professional world that usually defined our interactions. Can I ask you something? Sarah said, curling her legs under her on the couch. Of course. What do you want? I mean long term. 5 years from now, what does success look like to Alex? The question required more honesty than I usually offered to anyone, let alone my boss. But something about the evening, about her own vulnerability in the bar, made me want to give her a real answer. I want to matter, I said. I want to do work that actually affects people, not just moves products. And I want to figure out how to build a life that isn't just about work, even though work is important to me. I paused, studying her face in the soft light. What about you? What does success look like to Sarah 5 years from now? She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. When she spoke, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Honestly, I want to not be so lonely all the time. She looked down at her champagne glass. That sounds pathetic, doesn't it? It sounds human, I said. After David and I split, I threw myself into work because it was the one area of my life where I felt competent, where I could control outcomes. But coming home to an empty house every night, eating dinner alone, having no one to share the good days or the bad days with. She shook her head. Success doesn't mean much if you don't have anyone to share it with. The admission hung between us, more intimate than anything she'd revealed during our months of working together. I found myself wanting to close the physical distance between us on the couch, to offer some kind of comfort that went beyond words. I know exactly what you mean, I said. I moved to this city for the job, but I haven't figured out how to build a life here beyond work. Most nights I eat takeout while watching Netflix and tell myself I'm too tired to go out and meet people. At least you have the excuse of being new, Sarah said with a rueful smile. I've lived here for 6 years, and I still don't have close friends. Just work acquaintances and married couples who invite me to dinner parties where I'm the obvious third. Without quite deciding to do it, I moved closer to her on the couch. Not inappropriate close, but close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, close enough to catch the subtle scent of her perfume. You know what's strange? I said. Tonight talking with you, I feel more connected to another person than I have in months, maybe longer. Something shifted in her expression, a recognition that mirrored what I was feeling. Alex, I know, I said quickly. I know this is complicated. I know there are professional boundaries in age, differences and all sorts of reasons why this is probably a terrible idea. What is? She asked quietly, but her eyes were searching my face in a way that suggested she already knew. This feeling that I'd rather spend time with you than with anyone else I've met since moving here. The fact that I'm more myself around you than I am around people my own age who should theoretically be easier to connect with. We were sitting close enough now that I could see her breathing change, could sense the internal debate happening behind her eyes. When she spoke, the voice was barely above a whisper. I haven't felt this comfortable talking to someone in years. The admission felt like a door opening, and for a moment we just looked at each other, the weight of mutual recognition settling between us. I became hyper-aware of everything, the way the lamplight caught in her hair, the soft sound of her breathing, the minimal space between us on the couch, almost without conscious decision. My hand moved toward hers where it rested on the couch cushion. The moment our fingers touched, an electric current seemed to run between us, not just physical attraction, but something deeper. Connection. Understanding, the recognition of two people who'd found something in each other they hadn't known, they were looking for. But the touch lasted only seconds before Sarah pulled her hand back. The spell broken by the reality of our situation. We should probably get some sleep, she said, but she didn't move away immediately. Probably, I agreed, though the last thing I wanted was to end this moment of honesty and connection. When we finally moved to our respective beds, I lay in the darkness listening to the sounds of Sarah settling in for the night, my mind replaying every moment of the evening, every word exchanged, every look that had lasted a second longer than strictly professional. I woke up before my alarm immediately, aware that something had fundamentally shifted between Sarah and me the night before. The easy intimacy of our late-night conversation felt more complicated in the morning light, weighted with implications I wasn't sure how to navigate. Sarah was already awake, sitting at the small desk by the window with her laptop open and a cup of coffee from the in-room machine. She'd clearly been up for a while, and when she looked up to say good morning, her expression was carefully controlled back to the professional mask I knew so well. "Morning," she said with a smile that was pleasant, but noticeably more formal than anything I'd seen from her the previous evening. I ordered room service breakfast. "Hope that's okay." "It's perfect," I said. The politeness felt forced after the vulnerability we'd shared the night before. We moved around each other in the bathroom and dressing area with an awkwardness that hadn't existed even on our first night sharing the room. Every interaction felt charged with the memory of our conversation, with the moment our hands had touched, with the admission of feelings that neither of us quite knew how to handle in the daylight. Over breakfast, Sarah discussed the day's agenda with professional efficiency, but I caught her stealing glances at me when she thought I wasn't looking. The same hyper-awareness that was making me notice every detail of her morning routine, the way she organized her materials, the slight furrow in her brow when she reviewed her notes, the careful way she avoided letting our hands brush when passing. The coffee Mike met us in the lobby, energetic and cheerful after his night out with Jake. "How was the rest of your evening?" he asked as we walked to the convention center. "Quiet," Sarah said quickly. "Just some planning for today's sessions." But Mike, despite his generally oblivious nature, seemed to sense something different in the dynamic between us. He kept glancing back and forth during our walk, as if trying to identify what had changed but unable to put his finger on it. The morning sessions went well, but I found myself distracted in ways that had nothing to do with client presentations or marketing strategies. I was intensely aware of Sarah's presence where she was sitting, how she responded to different speakers, the moments when she would catch my eye during particularly interesting points in the presentations. During the lunch break, when Mike went off to network with other attendees, Sarah and I found ourselves alone at a high-top table in the convention center cafe. "About last night," she began, her voice low enough that no one else could hear. "Sarah, you don't need to. I do, actually." She looked directly at me, and I saw some of the previous evening's vulnerability in her eyes. What I said, what we talked about. "I don't want you to think I was being unprofessional or putting you in an uncomfortable position." "You weren't," I said. "If anything, I was the one who we both stepped outside our usual boundaries," she said gently. "I want you to know that I don't regret the conversation. But I also think we need to be careful about maintaining appropriate professional relationships." The word professional felt like a door closing, but I could see in her expression that this wasn't easy for her either. She was trying to do the right thing, trying to protect both of us from complications that could affect our careers and Our working relationship, understand? I said, though understanding and accepting were two different things. But for the rest of the day, understanding didn't make it easier to concentrate during presentations when Sarah was sitting 2 seats away. It didn't make it less significant when she smiled at a point I made during our afternoon client check-in. And it didn't make me any less aware of the tension that seemed to exist in the space between us, not uncomfortable. Exactly, but charged with possibility and restraint. The final dinner with the Pinnacle team had the relaxed atmosphere of a successful conclusion. Contracts would be signed, timelines would be established, and our agency had secured one of the biggest accounts in our history. Sarah seemed more at ease than she had all day, and I noticed she was drinking wine more freely than usual. 2 new partnerships. Patricia Morrison raised her glass in a final toast, and to the kind of creative collaboration that makes this industry exciting. As the evening wound down and the Pinnacle team prepared to leave, Patricia pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. I watched from across the restaurant as they talked, noting the way Sarah's posture shifted, more relaxed, more animated than her usual client interactions. "What do you think they're talking about?" Mike asked, following my gaze. "It's probably additional opportunities," I said, though I found myself more interested in the way Sarah laughed at something Patricia said, the genuine enjoyment on her face. When she returned to our table, there was an excitement in her manner that went beyond professional satisfaction. "Well," Mike prompted. "They want to discuss a potential long-term partnership," Sarah said, settling back into her chair. "Not just this campaign, but a comprehensive rebranding initiative over the next 2 years." The magnitude of what she was describing hit both Mike and me simultaneously. This wasn't just a successful account. This was the kind of opportunity that could transform our entire agency. "Holy shit," Mike said, then immediately looked apologetic for the language. Sarah laughed.
Zara laughed.
And there was something almost giddy in the sound. Holy shit indeed. We ordered another round to celebrate, and I watched Sarah's careful professional composure continue to soften. It's not drunk, but more relaxed than I'd ever seen her, more willing to let her guard down. Mike excused himself earlier than usual, claiming he wanted to get a good night's sleep before our morning flight. After he left, Sarah and I lingered at the table, neither of us eager to end the evening. "You know what's funny?" Sarah said, swirling the wine in her glass. "This is exactly the kind of success I've been working toward for years. The recognition, the financial security." She paused, looking out at the Chicago skyline visible through the restaurant's windows. "But the first thing I thought when Trisha told me about the partnership wasn't about the promotion or the bonus or what it would mean for my career. What was it?" I asked. She looked at me directly, and I saw something vulnerable in her expression. That reminded me of our conversation the night before. I thought about how I wouldn't have anyone to celebrate with when I got home, how I'd probably pour a glass of wine and sit in my empty house and feel proud and accomplished and completely alone. The admission felt like a continuation of our previous night's honesty, but there was something more urgent in her voice now, something that spoke to decisions being made rather than just feelings being acknowledged. Sarah ... "I keep thinking about what you said last night," she continued, "about feeling more connected to me than to people your own age. Because I feel the same way, Alex. And I know all the reasons why that's complicated and probably inappropriate. But I can't stop thinking about it." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling between us. The restaurant was nearly empty now, just a few other tables of diners finishing their meals, and our corner felt private, intimate. "What are you saying?" I asked quietly. "I'm saying that in 24 hours we're going to go back to our regular lives, back to our office dynamic, back to pretending that this weekend didn't change anything between us." She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "And I'm not sure I want to do that." Back in our hotel room, the conversation continued, with a different energy than the previous night. Sarah sat on her bed, rather than the couch. And when I joined her, they're careful to maintain some distance, but close enough that we could talk quietly. It felt like a deliberate choice we were both making. "I need you to know something," Sarah said, turning to face me more directly. "This isn't just about loneliness or wine or being away from our normal environment. What I'm feeling. What's been building between us, ... It feels real to me. It feels real to me too, I said, my voice barely audible. She reached out then, not hesitating this time, and took my hand in hers. The touch sent the same electric current through me as it had the night before, but now there was intention behind it, acknowledgement rather than accident. I haven't felt this comfortable talking to someone in years, she said, echoing her words from the previous evening. I haven't felt this kind of connection, ... maybe ever. We sat there in the dim lamplight, holding hands like teenagers, both of us aware that we were crossing a line that would be impossible to uncross. But for the first time since I'd started working at Meridian, the future felt full of possibility rather than uncertainty. Our checkout was delayed, Sarah sitting motionless on her bed at 9:30 a.m., fully dressed but lost in thought. When she finally looked up, her expression was resolute. Alex, we need to talk before we leave. Really talk. I sat across from her at the same position we'd occupied during our late-night conversations. But morning light made everything feel more consequential. What happened between us this weekend? She began carefully. What's been building? I need you to know I felt it too. All of it. Relief flooded through me. I was hoping, but I wasn't sure if I was reading things correctly. You weren't imagining it. She took a breath. We both know this is complicated. The age difference. Our professional relationship, my recent divorce, any of these could create serious problems. I've thought about all of that, I said. The risks are real. They are. But despite every logical reason this is probably a bad idea, I can't stop thinking about how natural this connection feels. She met my eyes directly. I'd like to see where this goes, if you're willing to navigate the complexity with me. More than willing, I said quickly. These past few days, I haven't felt this way about anyone in a long time, maybe ever. Smile was warm, genuine, so we're careful. Keep things professional at work until we figure out what this is. We're discreet, thoughtful about how our choices affect others. We give ourselves permission to explore this connection. Exactly. But Alex, if this ever starts feeling forced or damaging, we talk about it honestly. No letting resentment build, I promise. The flight home existed in two realities. Professionally, we discussed the pinnacle success while Mike chattered enthusiastically about future opportunities. But underneath, Sarah and I maintained careful awareness of each other's stolen glances. The brief brush of her thumb against mine during our airport handshake goodbye, driving home alone. I realized that in 3 days, everything had shifted. Monday morning felt surreal. Sarah maintained perfect professionalism, but her smile, when passing my desk, carried new warmth. In team meetings, I found myself noticing details I'd never seen before: her gestures, the way her eyes found mine when discussing our collaboration. Mike commented on the positive energy. Sarah seems happier since Chicago. You seem more confident too. At 3 p.m., Sarah's email appeared. Conference follow-up with professional language about deliverables, but ending with, would appreciate the chance to debrief our Chicago insights more thoroughly. Coffee tomorrow after work? Replied with equal professionalism, suggesting a quiet downtown cafe. The cafe was perfect busy, but with private corners. When Sarah arrived, uncertainty flickered across her usually confident expression. How has your first day back been? Surreal, I admitted. Good, but surreal. I know exactly what you mean. I kept wanting to reference things that felt too personal. For workplace conversation, have you been having second thoughts? I needed to know. Have you? The vulnerability in her counter-question was telling. Not about wanting to explore this, I said carefully. Relief crossed her features. What I felt with you this weekend, that connection, that understanding's not something I want to give up because the situation is complicated. Sarah, we're both adults making this choice with full awareness. She smiled, relaxing for the first time since sitting down. I've already spoken to HR about potentially restructuring our reporting relationship. Hypothetically, there are ways to remove the direct supervision issue. Her proactive planning demonstrated commitment beyond momentary attraction. So where does that leave us? Taking this one step at a time, being discreet, careful, but giving ourselves permission to see what develops. She paused. Being honest about what we want and what do you want. I want to spend more time with you. I want conversations beyond work. I want to see if what we found in Chicago can exist in our regular lives. All of that, I said. And I want to be someone who makes your life better, not more complicated. When we left an hour later, we'd established the framework for something. Both thrilling and mature relationship built on genuine connection, but approached with thoughtful planning that honored both our personalities and our complex situation. 6 weeks after Chicago, we developed a careful choreography of connection. Tuesday evenings became client strategy sessions at a quiet wine bar downtown. Thursday lunches were market research discussions at a small cafe 20 minutes from the office. Weekends found me at Sarah's apartment in Lincoln Park, officially non-existent visits that had become the most anticipated parts of my week. Her apartment reflected the same thoughtful elegance she brought to everything else: clean lines, warm colors, and books everywhere. The first time she invited me over, ostensibly to review campaign materials away from office interruptions, I'd been struck by how different she seemed in her own space. More relaxed, more animated, more willing to let her guard down completely. "Haven't had anyone over in months," she'd admitted, pouring wine in her kitchen while I examined the photographs on her refrigerator, mostly of her with college friends. A few family shots, evidence of a social life she rarely mentioned at work. "It doesn't look like a hermit's apartment," I'd teased. And she'd laughed in that genuine way I was becoming addicted to. Appearances can be deceiving. Our text messages developed their own coded language, work-related questions that were actually invitations, scheduling confirmations that carried undertones of anticipation, professional updates that ended with subtle personal references only we would understand. "Pinnacle timeline looks good. Hope you're having a productive evening." This meant she was thinking about me. Research complete. Looking forward to tomorrow's strategy session meant I missed her and couldn't wait to see her again. The physical attraction that had sparked in Chicago deepened into something more complex. There were stolen moments in her office when everyone else had left the door closed. Conversations that started about work and evolved into the kind of intimate discussions we'd had in that hotel room. It's the brush of her hand against mine when passing documents, the way she'd lean slightly closer when reviewing materials on my computer screen. Close enough that I could catch her perfume. Close enough to feel the warmth of her presence. But it was the emotional intimacy that surprised me most. Learning about Sarah outside the professional context revealed layers I'd never suspected. Her weekend routine of farmers market visits and long walks along the lake. Her habit of cooking elaborate dinners for one while listening to jazz. The way she talked about her marriage not with bitterness, but with a kind of analytical sadness about two people who'd been fundamentally incompatible. "David wasn't a bad person," she told me one Saturday afternoon as we sat on her couch, her head resting against my shoulder while rain drummed against the windows. "We just wanted different things. He wanted someone who would prioritize home and family over career. I wanted someone who understood that my work wasn't just a job, it was part of who I am." "Do you regret the divorce?" I asked, running my fingers through her hair. "I regret the failure," she said thoughtfully. "I regret that we couldn't figure out how to make it work. But I don't regret being honest about what I needed." These conversations revealed Sarah's complexity in ways that made me understand why our connection felt so significant. She was someone who'd spent years compartmentalizing her professional and personal selves. And with me, those boundaries were dissolving in ways that felt natural rather than forced. The comfort we found in each other exceeded both our expectations. Saturday mornings in her kitchen, sharing coffee and newspapers like a couple who'd been together for years. Sunday afternoons when she'd work on client presentations while I read on her couch. Both of us content in the quiet domesticity of shared space. Evenings when we'd cook together, talking about everything and nothing. Discovering compatibility in the small moments that reveal true partnership potential. Maintaining professional boundaries while conducting a secret relationship required constant vigilance. At work, Sarah and I perfected the art of appropriate distance, polite but not cold, collaborative but not overly familiar. But the effort was exhausting, and there were moments when the pretense felt almost unbearable. Mike's innocent observations created the most challenging moments. "You and Sarah have been working really well together lately," he commented one afternoon after a successful client presentation. "Like really well. It's almost like you can read each other's minds in meetings." I tried to keep my expression neutral. "We've just developed a good working rhythm." "It's more than that," he insisted. "There's this energy between you two when you're strategizing. Like you're on the same wavelength in a way that goes beyond just professional compatibility." His perceptiveness was both impressive and terrifying. If Mike could sense something different, how long before others noticed? The situation became more complicated when a promotion opportunity arose in our department. Sarah approached me privately to discuss the possibility, but our conversation was fraught with implications that went beyond career advancement. "The associate director position would be perfect for you," she said during one of our Thursday lunch meetings, "but it would mean working more closely with senior management, more visibility, more scrutiny of your professional relationships." We both understood what she wasn't saying directly. A promotion would bring opportunities, but it would also make our relationship more risky, more visible, more potentially damaging if discovered. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her struggling. Between her personal feelings and her professional judgment, "I think you should take it," she said finally. "Your career can't be secondary to our relationship. That's not fair to you, and it's not sustainable long term." Her willingness to prioritize my professional growth over her own comfort demonstrated the maturity that had drawn me to her in the first place. But it also highlighted the ongoing tension between our personal connection and professional reality. The most difficult moments came when Sarah had to maintain professional authority in situations involving me, giving feedback on my work in team meetings, making decisions about project assignments, handling the routine interactions of manager and subordinate, while being intensely aware of each other in ways our colleagues couldn't suspect. "Sometimes I catch myself smiling at something you've said in a meeting," she confessed one evening, "and I have to remind myself that my reaction needs to be proportional to what a manager would feel about good work from a team member, not what someone feels when the person they're falling for demonstrates their intelligence." 3 months into our carefully hidden relationship, Sarah shared fears that revealed the depth of her vulnerability about what we were building together. "I keep thinking about what would happen if people found out," she said one Sunday morning, as we lay in her bed, sunlight filtering through the curtains. "Not just the professional complications, but the judgment. The assumptions people would make about my motivations, about your advancement, about whether any of this is genuine." I turned to face her, struck by the pain in her voice. "What assumptions?" "That I'm some lonely divorcee taking advantage of a younger colleague, that you're sleeping your way to better assignments, that our work together isn't legitimate because there's something personal underneath it." The vulnerability in her admission made me realize how much courage it had taken for her to pursue this relationship despite her fears. "Anyone who knows us, who sees how we work together, would understand that what we have is real," I said. "And anyone who doesn't know us well enough to see that their opinion doesn't matter, it matters if it affects our careers. And we'll deal with that if it happens. But Sarah, what we have, this connection, this partnership, the way we understand each other, it's worth the risk." Over time, I began to understand Sarah's complexity in ways that went beyond our initial attraction. Her perfectionism wasn't just professional ambition, was armor developed over years of having to prove herself in environments where she wasn't automatically respected. Her careful control over her personal life wasn't coldness, it was protection against the kind of vulnerability that had left her feeling exposed during her marriage's dissolution. But with me, she allowed herself moments of genuine openness. That felt like privileges, sharing her fears about aging in a youth-obsessed industry, admitting her loneliness during the years between her divorce and meeting me, expressing her uncertainty about whether she wanted children or marriage, or any of the traditional life markers she'd once assumed she'd pursue. The quiet domestic moments we shared began to feel less like stolen time and more like glimpses of a possible future. Grocery shopping together on Saturday mornings, both of us instinctively coordinating our movements through the aisles. cooking dinner while discussing our days, finding natural rhythms of conversation in comfortable silence, falling asleep together and waking up to find ourselves still intertwined, both of us increasingly reluctant to return to the separate lives we maintained during the work week. "This feels real in a way I wasn't expecting," Sarah told me one evening as we cleaned dishes together after dinner. "Not just the attraction, not just the excitement of secrecy, but the actual compatibility. It's the way we fit together in ordinary moments." "I know exactly what you mean," I said. "Sometimes I forget we're supposed to be keeping this secret because being with you feels so natural." 6 months after Chicago, our relationship has settled into patterns that feel both thrilling and sustainable. We've learned to navigate the professional challenges without compromising our work quality or raising suspicion. We've developed communication strategies that allow us to support each other through difficult days without crossing visible professional boundaries. We've created a private world that exists alongside our public lives, separate but not separate, hidden but not shameful. Looking back on the person I was before that business trip, I'm struck by how much I've grown, not just in my understanding of relationships, but in my acceptance of complexity. 6 months ago, I thought adult relationships should be straightforward. You meet someone, you date openly, you progress through recognizable stages toward conventional commitments. What Sarah and I have doesn't fit those patterns, but it's more genuine than anything I've experienced before. I've learned that real connection doesn't always announce itself in socially acceptable ways. Sometimes it develops in hotel rooms during business trips. Sometimes it exists between people whose professional relationship makes it complicated. Sometimes it requires discretion and patience and the willingness to build something meaningful. Without external validation, Sarah has taught me that love and I can admit now that what we have is love. Even if we don't often use that word, isn't always simple or convenient or socially acceptable. Sometimes it asks you to be more mature than you thought you were capable of being. Sometimes it requires you to find satisfaction in private moments rather than public recognition. Sometimes it means accepting that the most meaningful connections in your life might not look the way you expected them to. Our Tuesday evening strategy. Sessions continue. Our Thursday lunch market research discussions remain constant appointments in both our calendars. Weekend mornings in her apartment have become the foundation of my week, the place where I'm most myself, most content, most hopeful about the future. We don't know what the long-term future holds. Sarah's conversations with HR about restructuring our professional relationship remain hypothetical, though increasingly detailed. My promotion has created new opportunities, but also new challenges for maintaining our secrecy. We talk sometimes about what it would mean to go public, about whether we want marriage or children or any of the traditional markers of serious relationships. But increasingly, I understand that what we have doesn't require those external validations to be meaningful. The love we've built in the spaces between professional obligations, the partnership we've developed despite institutional barriers, the genuine happiness we've found in each other's company, these things exist independent of social recognition or conventional timelines. 6 months ago, I thought I was looking for career advancement and professional recognition. I found those things. But I also found something I hadn't known I was missing: a person who sees me clearly, understands me completely, and chooses me consistently. Despite all the reasons it would be easier not to, that kind of connection I've learned is worth protecting, worth the complexity, worth the careful navigation required to preserve. Something rare and genuine in a world doesn't always make space for relationships that exist outside conventional categories. Some mornings, lying next to Sarah as she sleeps, watching the sunlight play across her features, I'm struck by the strange beauty of our situation. We've built something real in the spaces others overlook, found extraordinary connection in ordinary moments, created a love story that may never be fully public, but is completely authentic. And for now, that's enough. More than enough. It's everything.